why FEMA cannot come into this particular environmental disaster just yet. Let's talk about this even further with former FEMA official Mark Neveau. He is standing by with us. And Mark, thanks so much for being with us. So that is a question so many of us have. What is that criteria? What is the line that needs to be crossed for FEMA to come into this situation? Do you know?
Yeah, what they're going to do is they're going to take a look at the extent of the damage, Andrew, and they're going to put a factor in that. And so what they do is they figure out, a damage assessment. They calculate that in terms of dollars and cents. What's the impact to businesses? What are the impact to individuals? Then they figure that based upon the population, and they come up with a formula. And unfortunately, at this particular time, this disaster doesn't rise to that level. And the idea behind the formula and the calculation is to say that the state itself has the necessary resources to be able to handle this. That doesn't mean that the FEMA won't come in. The president certainly has a right to do an emergency declaration to help them, but that's really determined solely by him without factors that we just talked about.
And, Mark, I'm also kind of curious, too. Mike DeWine says, essentially, based on the facts that are here today, FEMA can't do anything. Mark, this is about federal dollars, is it not? That is where FEMA comes in to assist these local communities, right?
There is, to an extent, yes. Now, FEMA definitely has programs available to help people, but really it's based upon the state not having the capability to handle this themselves. And because this is a private business, it's the railroad, and it's a hazardous materials spill, they're required to have a response plan, they're required to have cleanup companies stand by, and they also have the first right of recovery in these scenarios to be able to go in and mitigate things. And so that's what you're seeing to some degree, that you let the private sector handle as much as possible.
Mark, is it also, though, because there are other federal agencies assisting? Is that, part of FEMA's, I don't want to say reluctance, but is that why they're waiting? The EPA is there. The CDC is there. HHS is already there on the ground.
Yeah, what they're doing is they're there based upon what we call their own authorities. So Congress has given them the latitude as well as the funding to be able to manage these incidents. So, you don't necessarily need a presidential disaster declaration to have those agencies come in, and they're partnered with state agencies. You can see they're doing water testing, air testing. They're taking a look at, providing technical consultation on how to mitigate not only the after effects of it, but also during the incident itself. And this was a pretty difficult incident, and a very difficult solution that they put forward was to, basically blow a hole into the tanks so you wouldn't have, this catastrophic explosion. Very unique situation.
Yeah, Mark, also we heard from Governor DeWine. He says the plume has dissipated. He says the Ohio River is very well monitored. He says the water that is coming in there, the testing is fine. He says experts are testing it each and every day. Have you ever seen a situation in now a man-made environmental disaster because of this rail accident, where what experts are saying to the wider public, that the testing they are doing with the water and with the air is coming back fine, it's coming back healthy, yet the wider population is not convinced. They are entirely skeptical. Is this a breakdown of confidence of communications with the expert class to the everyday American? How does that get rectified?
Yeah, that's well said, Andrew. I think what's happened when you experience something to this degree where, this entire town was evacuated and they had to leave their home for a number of days just because they were afraid of an explosion, what they call a BLEVE, a boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion out of these rail cars. And so when you get to the scenario where you're days afterwards and you're doing testing, now had you done that testing during the first 2 days, you probably would have different readings both at water and in terms of air monitoring and plume monitoring. But now that it's subsided to some degree, you're going to start to have lower readings and safe readings, not uncommon in this scenario. What has to happen, though, is that the public, the people who live in that community, they have to feel comfortable with that information. So some of the agencies have actually published online the results of those surveys, those studies to be able to share with people. But it's going to also take some personal contact from the state as well as the federal agencies within that community, letting them know what transpired, what is going to transpire, and what the readings are from those reports without question.
So, Mark, this happened now, what, 2 weeks ago, the night of February the 3rd, and you've seen just this week more and more officials there hold regular press briefings, Biden administration officials down on the ground, members of Congress who represent this part of Ohio down on the ground. And so, a lot of people are talking about that controlled explosion after the train derailed. That happened around Monday or Tuesday after the derailment, and this is what precipitated this crisis. But you saw almost a week go by, a week and a half go by, until the full forces of the federal government, state government were there really paying attention to this. Was that delay, was that gap unwise?
Well, I think what you're going to have to do is go back and take a look at the time frame when the incident took place, who made the decisions to be able to take the approach that they did in terms of operation. It is unusual to say that we're going to actually blow a hole in the side of a rail car because that's the best way to be able to mitigate this and let it burn off. That's not uncommon. You'll see that with LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, where there are times when there's a fire and that tank car is threatened with a rapid explosion, which can then spread, miles and destroy everything in its wake. And so in this case, what they tried to do, and it seems like they were somewhat successful, other than the environmental part of it, was to be able to contain that explosion, be able to burn off those components. And keep in mind, what we're talking about are 3 or 4 different types of chemicals. And nobody quite knows what's going to happen when you start mixing those chemicals, put them in a fire, create pressure. And so this was a difficult decision for the incident commander. So far, in terms of first response, it looks like it was the right decision. We won't know for sure until we go back and take a look, do an evaluation, and what they call a critique after the fact.
Okay, Mark, just lastly, let's talk about long-term effects. Obviously, it's very hard to determine what those could be. And you've heard some comparisons, and we can get into the fact if those are, over-the-top, hyperbolic, 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl. You've heard these, previous historic incidents, very, very different, being kind of bandied about. Do you think that's appropriate? Does this rise to that level? Because many residents are concerned, a month from now, a year from now, 5 years from now. Is this going to linger?
Well, I think, what we're starting to see based upon the testing, the water, the air, and all of those types, it's starting to mitigate, meaning that they're getting readings that indicate that most of that stuff is safe. So here are the 2 questions. Are the measurements and the tools and equipment that you use to take those readings, are the subject matter experts that are on the ground making those determinations? If all of that is in sync communicating and that information is accurate and people feel comfortable with it, then you're going to start to see this mitigate, start to minimize, start to have less and less impact. Are there going to be long-term impacts? Absolutely. We saw, 3,500 fish that were killed. The water is moving through that particular area and taking it out to the river. So those are good news things that's starting to be able to be mitigated and handled. Okay. What they got to keep an eye on is the future and what those readings are going to be with the testing that they will continue to conduct.
All right. Mark Neveau, as always, we appreciate your time, your insight into these major headlines, and we'll talk again. Thanks so much.
You bet, Andrew. Thank you.